name is Latoya Pitts, and I'm the newly selected Executive Director of Christamore House, which is a multi-service center that has been serving Hallville and the Near West Side for more than 113 years. Christamore House is well known for a variety of different historic programs that we offer. Our boxing program, which is over 60 years old. Our House of Teen program, which is our newest program to the house. We have an after-school program. In that program, students they have access to reading tutors, they have access to homework help, they have access to music lessons, and a variety of different things that help bridge the gap that low-income students sometimes have with their counterparts. We also have a family strengthening program. We have an early childhood education program, and the goal of that program is to get our students ready to enter kindergarten.
The Christamore House Early Childhood Program is a program for the youth that are in this community, in the Hallville community. It's a chance to get the children to have a sense of just loving education.
We have a gym, we have a computer lab, I do my homework. We have the drums, the flute. I play the flute. We have violin, piano. I love the teachers and what they do for us and how much they care.
Before I was in the after-school program, I would consider myself a bad kid. I didn't follow directions very well. I did what I wanted, whatever I wanted. But once I first started going here, I finally found someone who cared. Well, I mean, my parents cared, but I needed someone else, another voice, you know?
Within the last year, we have increased our reading for our students in early pre-K that we're entering into kindergarten, as well as our third grade students who have to take the iRead test. We also help our students who are in high school create a life plan. We have one of the only STEM computer labs at a community center at our building. Our goal is to give students access to resources that they wouldn't normally be able to have, that their families may not necessarily be able to provide, to show them that there's a world outside of Hallville and the Near West Side. And so that's some of the major things that we do.
I joined the Christamore House Guild because I had come to this luncheon several years and I just love to read and I just love this luncheon. But the more I learned about the Guild and the impact that they have on the house and the Hallville community, it really inspired me.
I decided to join the Christamore House Guild. I liked that it focused on reading and authors and writing, but also that the funds went directly to scholarships for kids that needed the funds. And a lot of our scholars, they are the first members of their family to attend college.
The scholars are amazing. They come back in the summertime, they come back on spring break, they talk about their experiences, and the main key component is the students can look at somebody and say, you know what, they once sat in this seat, they once came for after school tutoring, they necessarily weren't always good at math, and look at them, they're in college, they're doing well. They're from my community, and so it makes a big correlation. It makes a huge impact.
The scholarship helped me stay on a narrow path for school, knowing that I'm a senior now and I'm about to receive my undergrad degree in software engineering. I thank them a lot for giving me that scholarship.
So my name is Monty Pandya and I'm a junior at Butler University and I'm studying biology and Spanish there. So with my biology degree, I'm hoping to go to med school. I'm one of the first kids from my family to graduate college. So volunteering at the house and just seeing that there's an institution that's helping kids with very similar backgrounds, support them in their endeavors to attain higher education and support them as they're growing up, even starting from preschool, and also support a much different age range, such as the senior center was very meaningful to me to know that something like that exists and in a community that I've grown up in my entire life. So that's why coming to Christamore House every summer, it doesn't feel like I'm just volunteering to get hours. It actually means something to me because I know that all the kids there and all the senior citizens there have a really good future ahead of them because they're in pretty good hands.
Being a Guild scholar had a huge impact on my undergraduate career. The Guild Scholarship paid for my books all through undergrad. I was an accounting major, and so my books were really, really expensive. So not having to worry about how I was gonna pay for my books was a big relief on myself as well as my family. I could actually concentrate and do well in school. The students that participate in after school and summer camp, we have this affirmation that they say, and the staff member says, "Welcome to the house," and the kids say, "Where I am somebody." Welcome to the house where I create my destiny. Welcome to the house where I discover my purpose. Welcome to the house where I build my future. Welcome to the house.
Welcome to the 40th Annual Book and Author Benefit Luncheon. My name is Stephanie Allen, and I served as the 2019-2020 Christamore House Guild President. I know this is not how we envisioned this year's Benefit Luncheon, but we are so grateful for this opportunity to share this year's outstanding authors and the Marge Krager Award winner with you virtually. Christamore House is celebrating 112 years of service to the Hawville and near West Side communities. We are honored to continue this remarkable tradition of raising money for scholarships and strengthening educational programming at Christamore House. Proceeds raised by the Book and Author Benefit fund our Francis Carter Coburn Scholarship Fund and assist early childhood and after-school educational services at Christamore House. Over the years, the Book and Author Benefit has raised over $2.6 million. These proceeds have benefited nearly 1,000 scholarship recipients and enhanced programming at Christamore House. Christamore House Guild is proud of the impact Christamore House has on Indianapolis. We wish to thank all of our sponsors, including Herman and Kittle Properties and Glick Family Philanthropies, and we extend a huge thank you to our authors for their literary contributions and enthusiastic participation in our virtual Book and Author Benefit. On behalf of Nikki Griffin, Gianna Scapucci, and the entire 2020 Book and Author Benefit Committee, I thank each and every one of you for attending the virtual benefit. You are helping to assist the youth of Indianapolis, Hawville, and near West Side achieve their dreams through the power of education. We are so grateful for your support. I'd now like to hand it off to the 2020 Book and Author Benefit Chairs, Nikki Griffin and Gianna Scapucci.
Hello, I'm Gianna Scapucci.
And I'm Nikki Griffin, and we are the co-chairs of the 2020 Book and Author Benefit.
Nikki and I were really excited to spend this day with you in person. However, we still have the opportunity to present to you our 6 distinguished authors and one very special young lady. Each year, money raised from the Book and Author Benefit goes to help provide scholarship funding to the young men and women that are part of the Francis Carter Coburn Scholarship Program. Each year, a senior scholarship recipient is selected and presented with the Marge Krager Scholarship Award. This year, we have a very special young lady who exemplifies every single attribute that Marge exemplifies and has exemplified for her 63 years within the Guild. She was a servant to the house and a servant to the community.
This year's recipient is Manzi Pandya. She graduated from Butler University with a double major in Spanish and biology. She will begin this fall at West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine. Her future goals are to introduce healthcare clinics to underprivileged areas in the U.S. and beyond. Congratulations, Manzi.
Hi everyone, my name is Manzi Pandya, and I just graduated from Butler University with a bachelor's degree in biology and Spanish. And I'm very excited to share that I will be beginning medical school at the West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine in a few weeks. My educational pursuits would not have been possible without the generosity and support of my family and everyone involved with the Christamore House. During my time at Butler, the Francis Carter Coburn Scholarship has meant a lot to me and my family. Not only did it contribute to my college expenses, but it also introduced me to the Christamore House Family and Community Center. This place will always have a special place in my heart because its students, staff, and mentors have taught me what it means to take care of a community. They have laid such a strong foundation for its children and their families to have a constant source of support. As a first-generation college graduate, I know that I would have loved to have been a part of this organization while growing up. And now, as I move on to my next level of study, I am very honored to have been selected as the recipient for the Marg Kroger Award. This contribution has made my transition to another state and the beginning of my career much less intimidating. I will always be grateful to the Christamore House Guild for investing in my education. And lastly, I would like to thank everyone who has supported the Christamore House Guild and their efforts to continue taking care of this community.
Thank you, Manzi, and congratulations.
And now, on to the part that we know everybody comes to our benefit for, our authors. And first, we would like to thank Herman and Kittle Properties for presenting our first author, Mary Kubica, and her book, The Other Misses.
Hello, patrons of the Christamore House Guild. I am Mary Kubica, and although I think it's probably pretty safe to say that we would all rather be celebrating this day together in person at the Indiana Roof Ballroom, I'm just super excited that, given the present situation, that I can join you in your homes for a few minutes today, albeit virtually, and talk to you a little bit about myself and my latest novel, The Other Misses. I wanted to start today by thanking all the supporters of the Christamore House Guild and for the organizers of the event for including me here today. And I also wanted to offer a huge congratulations to the Francis Carter Coburn Scholars, as well as the 2020 featured scholarship recipient, Mansi Pandaya. Congratulations to all of you. I've been a writer pretty much for as long as I can remember. I remember when I was about 7 or 8 years old being at a sleepover with a cousin of mine, and until that time I had been a huge reader, loved to read anything I could get my hands on, loved to go to the bookstore and the library and just bring home as many books as I possibly could. But until that day, I hadn't thought much about the writers sitting at home writing these books that I loved to read so much. It was as if they just began there in the bookstore or the library the moment I laid eyes on them. But then I was at the sleepover with my cousin, and she had written a story that she shared with me, and I was totally taken with her story itself, which was really phenomenal, but also this whole idea that people wrote books, that these books had a life before, I first laid eyes on them at the bookstore or the library. And so I knew right away that that was something that I wanted to do. And I remember, like, that very minute grabbing a pen and a pencil and starting to work on some story. And since that day, I haven't ever stopped writing. But writing for me was always something that I was very private about. I wrote for me and only me back in the day. And it was, what I called fiction was really more a journal of sorts with characters who were a little bit like myself, but more adventurous and more outgoing. And I'd write stories about these characters and get to live vicariously through them. When I was younger, there was never a point in my life when I thought I wanted to be an author when I grew up, because the idea of writing things and putting them out there for all of the world to read just absolutely terrified me. But I knew career-wise that I wanted to be a teacher ever since I was a little girl. So after college, I went that route. I became a high school history teacher, and I taught both in the suburbs of Chicago, which is where I now live, as well as in the Omaha public school system for a couple of years when my husband was relocated there for work. But during my entire teaching career, I continued to write at whatever opportunity I had, because it was just something I was so passionate about. And then in 2005, my daughter was born, and I decided to set my teaching career aside for a while and start my family. And in the years that followed, started working on what would later become my debut novel, The Good Girl. And, just it set in motion this whole writing career that I never really imagined when I was a younger girl. The Other Misses is my 6th novel. It came out just in February of this year. And it's like all my books before it, it's psychological suspense. And this one centers on the Faust family, Will, Sadie, and their 2 sons, Otto and Tate. And the Fausts are from Chicago, but they inherit a home on an island off the coast of Maine when Will's sister dies. And the Fausts have had just a number of personal and professional hardships in their life. It's a good time for them to kind of leave their life behind and start fresh in Maine. So they do. So they move to Maine. Not only do they inherit this home though, but they take guardianship of Will's angry, sad, sullen teenage niece, Imogen, who is not happy that this family she doesn't know is moving into her home with her, and basically that their fresh start is kind of coming at her expense. Imogen is all alone in the world. Her mother has just died. She never grew up with a father. And so she's quite angry, but also kind of becomes a bit of a threatening presence in the home to the Faust family. And then shortly after the Fausts arrive in this Maine home, a woman right across the street from them is murdered. And all eyes in this really tight-knit, small community, islands community, look suspiciously towards the Faust family. And as they fall under the suspicion, the mother, Sadie, realizes that the only way to really protect her family and prove their innocence is to find out who murdered this woman for herself. So it was a super fun book to write. It's very atmospheric. I think it's the first book of mine that I've taken entirely outside of Chicago and set somewhere else. And like I said, this one is set on an island off the coast of Maine, which was really fascinating to me. I've been enamored with Maine for as long as I can remember. So I loved setting a book here and learning more about the 4,000 islands that are off the coast of Maine, and just kind of how they work, and how the inhabitants are reliant on the ferry system to get them to and from the mainland. And here the Faust family is on this island, and there's a killer there with them, and as winter kind of descends upon them, there's this growing fear that the bay around their island will freeze and they will quite literally be trapped there with this killer. So I hope that you enjoy it if and when you have a chance to read it. And again, I want to thank everybody for giving me the opportunity to be here today, speaking with all of you. And I want to thank all of the patrons of the Christamore House Guild for supporting such a wonderful organization. Be healthy, be safe, everyone, and I hope that one day soon we get to meet in person. Thank you.
Our second author is presented by the Glick Family Foundation, Ariel Lawhon, and her book, codename Hélène.
Hi, I am Ariel Lawhon, author of Codename Hélène. Thank you so much to all of the wonderful patrons of Christamore House Guild for including me in this event. I so badly wish we could all be in person to celebrate the amazing work that you're doing and to celebrate this year's scholarship winners, especially Mansi Pundaya. I know they are going to do amazing things. I'm delighted to be with you, if only virtually. I am coming to you today from my home, my very messy office in Nashville, Tennessee, where I am still somewhat quarantined with my husband and 4 sons. So if you hear arguing, if you hear somebody run through the house, just forgive me. We are all in this together. But I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted that you chose my book. I can't explain how wonderful it feels anytime someone chooses my book. whether in a library or a bookstore or anywhere else. You see, this is the only thing that I have ever wanted to do. I grew up in a place where opportunities like this didn't exist. If you have ever been to Taos, New Mexico, you may have heard of a bridge. It's called the Gorge Bridge. It is 20 miles outside of Taos proper, and on the other side of that bridge is a cattle guard and a 6-mile dirt road. And at the very end of that dirt road is the house that I grew up in, right at the point where personal property meets federal land. My parents built that house with their own 2 hands. It had no running water, no electricity. It did have a cistern and an outhouse. But the reality is, when you grow up like that, you grow up without a television. So I read. And before I could read to myself, my mother read to me. And in those early days of my childhood, I learned that stories are powerful and that I wanted to be a storyteller. I didn't know how to make that happen. And as I said, opportunities weren't very few and far between. So I left home at 16 years old. I went out on my own, I worked, and I traveled. And eventually, in my early 20s, I married a wonderful green-eyed man from Texas. And we proceeded to have 4 babies in 5 years. So yes, God does have a sense of humor. I'm proof. Once I stopped having babies, however, I started writing books. And Codename Helene is the 4th of those books. It is the story of a woman named Nancy Wake. She was a young Australian expat living in France at the outbreak of World War II. And the truth is, I'd never heard of her until I got an email from a friend of mine who was native to New Zealand and Australia. And she asked if I'd ever heard about this woman. And then she promptly told me that if I didn't write about her next, we could no longer be friends. And the truth is, I hadn't heard about her. I had no idea of the spectacular exploits of this woman. But as I began to read and research about Nancy Wake, I found an extraordinary woman who also just happened to leave home at 16, who also traveled much of the world. And she ended up living in Paris right before the outbreak of World War II. And it was there that she met a man named Henri Fiocca. And they fell in love, and no sooner did they get married than the Germans invaded France. And Nancy was faced with the decision everyone at that time was faced with. Do I stand here and do nothing, or do I do something? And Nancy Wake was not the kind of woman to do nothing. So she began smuggling people and documents from one end of France to another. And she became so good at her job that she ended up becoming the Gestapo's #1 target throughout the war in any theater. And there was a 5 million franc price put on her head. And that was the point at which Nancy was forced to do what she had helped so many other people do. She had to escape. But she didn't quit. She went straight to England. She joined the Special Operations Executive, and she became a spy for the British, eventually being parachuted back into France, behind enemy lines, where she led over 7,000 French resistance fighters into battle against the Germans. The truth is, I couldn't make a story like this up. I couldn't make a hero like this up. And I was enchanted with Nancy, and I knew I had to tell her story. So yes, Codename Helene is a love story, and it's a war story, and it's a story about friendship and resiliency. But more than anything, it is a story about an extraordinary woman living during really uncertain times who chose to take on the world. If you've read it, thank you. If you haven't read it, I hope you do. And regardless, I hope you love Nancy as much as I do. I hope She makes you feel brave during these really strange days. Again, thank you so much for including me. I wish I could be there. I wish we were allowed to shake hands and hug, and I would love to look you in the eye and thank you in person. But regardless, know I so believe in the work you're doing, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to support it, even if just in this little way. Thank you for including me. Thank you for including my book, and good luck. Stay safe.
Thank you to Schmidt Associates for presenting our third author, Kiley Reid, with her book, Such a Fun Age.
I am Kiley Reid, and I am the author of Such a Fun Age. I was so excited to attend the festival this year, but obviously the world had other plans, so I really appreciate you still featuring me in Such a Fun Age, and I can't wait to tell you about it. So this is my first novel. Well, it's the first good novel I've written that actually got published. This is the first published novel called Such a Fun Age, and this was inspired by a lot of things. I've always been really interested in transactional relationships. I love awkward moments. I am really fascinated by that period in your 20s where you're not quite feeling like an adult, but you have adult responsibilities, but your health insurance is running out, but you're still babysitting, and so you see all of those factors here in Amira Tucker. Amira Tucker is 25 years old. She's a graduate from Temple University. She's a young Black babysitter living in Philadelphia, where I live. And on the first night in the book, in the first chapter, you see her babysitting little Briar Chamberlain. They're having a great time. They're dancing in a grocery store until a security guard, upon seeing a Black woman with a white child, accuses her of kidnapping the child. And so someone pulls out their cell phone. It's a tragically familiar scene where someone is being filmed in an instance of racial bias, and Amira is humiliated. So after that, Alex Chamberlain, Briar's mom, sets out to right the night's wrongs and make sure that her babysitter knows that she's there for her and she can be like family to them. But from there, it works in a bit of a way like a comedy of good intentions. It's about what it means to make someone family. It's about being a grown-up, and it's about doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. So a lot of my readers say that my book made them feel uncomfortable and they didn't know who to like and all of those moments, and it has a lot of those moments where you have to put a book back down. Those are my favorite, and so I hope you can have fun reading it. I hope it makes you really uncomfortable, and I hope it proposes a lot of questions to you about the world we live in and what we're doing with our actions. Thank you so much again for having me. I'm so sad that it couldn't be in person. I just want to say a huge thank you to the patrons supporting the Christamore House Guild, and a huge congratulations to the Francis Carter Coburn Scholars, particularly Manzi Pundaya. Scholarships are a big deal. I would not be here without scholarships, so congratulations. Thank you so much again. This is Kiley Reid with Such a Fun Age. I appreciate you having me. Have a good one.
Thank you to Keith and Mary Hinkabine for sponsoring our fourth author, Kate Elizabeth Russell, and her book, My Dark Vanessa.
Hello, my name is Kate Elizabeth Russell. I'm the author of My Dark Vanessa. My Dark Vanessa tells the story of Vanessa Y, who at 32 years old learns that the teacher who she believes she had a consensual relationship with when she was a teenager in high school has now, in 2017, been accused of sexual abuse by another former student. And the novel moves back and forth in time between 2017 and the early 2000s when the relationship started. Wanted to thank the Christamore House Guild for putting this on. It's very unfortunate that it couldn't happen in person. And congratulations to the Francis Carter Coburn Scholars, and to the 2020 scholarship recipient, Mansi Padaya. And okay, some suggested topics for me to talk about here. So when did I first realize that I wanted to be a writer? I don't think I never really realized it. Being a writer writing was something that I just always did, really naturally from when I was a kid. But the idea of like being a writer was never, didn't ever seem like an option to me. Certainly not something that I could ever make a living doing. So writing was just something that I always did while I, had real jobs. But now I am in the incredibly fortunate position to make a living from writing, which is something I'm grateful for every day. How long did it take you to write this book? 18 years off and on of working on it. I first started working with the characters in My Dark Vanessa when I was 16, and I continued to work on it through college. I got a BFA in creative writing and then went straight to an MFA program and eventually a PhD, and I worked on the book through all of those academic programs. What is your work schedule like while writing? It really depends. It depends on what stage of the writing process I'm at. Sometimes it's just sitting and working all day, especially if I'm really far along in the writing process. I can work for like 10 hours a day, but if it's early on when I'm still sort of generating ideas, I usually work for a couple hours a day. Let's see. If you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be? Just to stick with it, I guess. When I think it was Ta-Nehisi Coates gave this advice in one interview that I saw, which was that like perseverance means a lot, even if it's just the perseverance of not giving up on the idea of working on being a writer, even if your career, if you have one as a writer, hasn't progressed to the point that you want it to be. Because when you're young, a lot of people want to be writers when they're young, and then inevitably people give up on that dream either out of necessity or just out of frustration or whatnot. People, go in and get real careers, or they go to law school or what have you. But if you stick with it and you keep working on your craft, then you can arrive at a point when you're maybe in your 30s, like I was, and you finish your book finally, and you suddenly sort of take a step back and realize that you are a good writer because you've worked on it. You've worked on your craft for all those years, and you didn't give up. And yeah, that's a piece of advice that really resonated with me. So yeah, sticking with it, even when it's hard and feels a little hopeless, and not getting discouraged or sidetracked by the perceived successes of others. So yeah. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed my book.
We would like to thank Vaughn & Vaughn, Bookkeeping Plus, and Eskenazi Health for presenting our next author, Kathleen West, and her novel, Minor Dramas and Other Catastrophes.
Indie book and author patrons. I'm Kathleen West, and I am the author of Minor Dramas and Other Catastrophes, and I'm coming to you from my home office in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Of course, this is not how I imagined meeting all of you. In fact, I had a great new outfit selected for my trip to Indianapolis. And instead of wearing that, I'm wearing like the same elastic waistband, stretchy jeans that I have been wearing multiple times per week for multiple months here in our quarantine at home. And although the whole spring has been kind of filled with disappointing cancellations, I'm sure not just for me, but for all of us, I am especially disappointed not to be with you in Indianapolis. I was so looking forward to gathering with a large group of readers there and meeting the incredible panel of authors, more impressive and more accomplished authors than I am, that the book and author organizers put together. I was hugely honored to be included in that wonderful group. And I was super excited to celebrate and amplify the work of the Christamore House Guild, especially right now as Minneapolis and the United States have sort of erupted for justice in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. I really believe that organizations like the Christamore House that support and uplift Black and Brown children and families, that they really deserve my support. So I was looking forward to that too. As a teacher, the missions and programs of Christamore House really speak to me. I've spent a lot of time on the website watching some videos there, and I really admire the way the Christamore House supports children and families through multiple stages, from early childhood all the way through college visits, and Christamore offers sustainable family and senior support too, so kind of a whole wraparound organization. I was really looking forward to seeing it and celebrating it in person. As some of you know, Minor Dramas and Other Catastrophes is a novel about an educational institution that is perhaps slightly less supportive than Christamore House. In my novel, which was my first novel, we meet a well-meaning and hardworking English teacher at Liston Heights High School, a really affluent school in suburban Minneapolis. We also meet a helicopter theater mom who has lost all sense of boundaries, and we meet the teenagers who are kind of caught between their conflict with each other as a social media scandal erupts in the school and in the community at large. In the beginning of the story, Julia, she's the helicopter theater mom, her son Andrew tries out for the high school musical called Ellis Island. Julia is certain that he is ready for a big part. He has paid his dues in the props department over the years. She and her husband have hosted the year-end cast and crew party for multiple theater seasons in the past. She's paid for Andrew's private dancing and singing lessons. She's made a sizable contribution to the school's theater department, and he is ready for a headlining role, and even more, he deserves it. She calls to remind the principal of the school that he deserves it in advance of the auditions. That's how certain she is. So on the day the cast list is to be posted, Julia just can't wait to hear about Andrew's part, whether or not all of her efforts have paid off. And no one is answering her texts. Now, I don't know about you, but like my own 16-year-old who's going to be a junior next year, he's not in the habit of answering my texts in the middle of the school day. But Julia expects more from her son. But still, he won't answer her. She can't get any inside information from the mother of the stage manager. So she decides she'll just make a quick trip to school. She'll use the security pass that she kept after the set build and sneak in and check the cast list in the performing arts wing just between classes, just to make sure that Andrew has done it. So she runs over there and everything's going according to plan, except for she gets a little held up in the hallway by the assistant theater director, and the bell rings. So kids are crowded in the hallways, and she kind of has to navigate this crowd of people in front of the drama bulletin board to find the cast list. She does, however, like maybe some other adults would have seen the crowd of kids and decided that now is not the time, maybe turned around and gone back to the car. But this is not Julia. She's like the definition of the over-invested mother. So she pushes her way through the crowd of kids, and when she gets to the front, she puts her finger down on the list, finds Andrew's part, and she's so happy that he's gotten this inspector role that in the middle of sort of like a celebratory dance where she does this big fist pump, she elbows the female lead in the gut from the back, and that girl doubles over, and it would probably be not that big of a deal, except for that, of course, a 9th grader has videotaped the incident, and it goes immediately viral. To complicate things, Julia's daughter has appeared on the edge of the crowd of kids looking at the cast list, accompanied by her favorite teacher, Isabel Johnson, who is sort of like the polar opposite of Julia and has been teaching Tracy that to focus solely on marriage and children is to waste your life. And Julia has made every choice to, be with her kids nonstop. In fact, some could say that she's sort of living through her children. So this incident kind of sets off the conflict of the book. The story takes off from there. And because I was a teacher for 20 years, before this book was published last February, I had a lot of inside information about how this might go. And one of the most frequent questions I get is how much of it is autobiographical. In fact, there were many parents who, when I told them about the book being published and the topic of the book, approached me rather nervously to say, like, oh my goodness, have you written a book about me? And I've been happy to tell those people, like, no, I have not written a book about you. But I will have to say, to be honest, that I have enjoyed sort of poking fun at the more egregious behavior I've experienced in schools. Like, the parent who tried to pay me $50 to change the date of an American Lit final. That event itself isn't in there, but I have to say, like, thinking about that definitely informed the character of Julia Abbott. Or the mom that told me that there was no way her son who could have cheated on an American Lit quiz because he had too good of a relationship with Jesus. I was definitely thinking about that sort of thing when I wrote kind of the ridiculous behavior there. It was also really fun to catalog life inside a high school. There's a lot of ridiculous aspects to being a teacher. How your time is scheduled to the second and you have to eat your lunch in 7 minutes and faculty meetings and all kinds of details that I think people don't know about being an adult in a school and working with kids. I am kind of wondering, and I have heard from some readers and some colleagues about how parents' impressions of teachers may change after this period of COVID when we've all been at home kind of supervising our kids' academics and school lives. Perhaps we will have some more appreciation for teachers and what they've been able to accomplish. Anyway, to close, I don't want to go on and on, but to close, I will say that I so wish I were with you in Indianapolis. I'm so grateful to have been included by the book and author organizers for this year's non-event. And I'm grateful to all of you who have purchased and taken the time to read minor dramas. I hope to see you sometime in the future.
We would like to thank Cheryl and Frank Sullivan, Kirby Risk, Bradley Company, Fager, Drinker, Biddle, and Reith for our last author, Lisa Wingate, and her book, The Book of Lost Friends.
Hey everybody. I wish I could be there in person to talk with you about books and enjoy your beautiful city and a nice dinner together. Instead, I'm here in the cozy cabin loft where much of the Book of Lost Friends was written, so that's kind of appropriate. And we can at least talk virtually. Kind of a funny story about virtual. My parents, when I went to college, insisted I would get a practical degree, and so coming out of school, I was a technical writer for Memorex. And at the time, Hewlett-Packard came to give us this big, fancy, slick video presentation about how someday there would be this worldwide network where people would send emails, electronic mails instantly all across the world, and they'd have these video meetings and they would chat on video in real time. We all just looked at each other in that conference room and said, that is the most ridiculous thing ever. That will never happen in our lifetime. And now here we are talking about books virtually on video. So I guess the moral to that is never say never. So the Book of Lost Friends, the book that came out this April, is what I would have talked to you about if I were there. People always ask what inspired a book, where did the idea come from? For me, most books are inspired by some piece of hidden history that just blows my mind wide open. And I think, why haven't I heard of this? And who else hasn't heard of this? And what's the rest of this story? And I have to know more. And that begins to generate characters in a story in my head. In the case of Book of Lost Friends, it was a piece of history that was brought to me by a reader. I was working on another book, and just on a random day, an email came in from a reader named Diane Plochet in New Orleans. And she said, I've just finished reading Before We Were Yours, and there's some work I'm doing that has a lot of similar themes, and I thought you might like to know about it. And so she told me a little bit about this work she was doing, entering these ads in a database for genealogists and historians and teachers for the Historic New Orleans Collection Museum. And to the bottom of the email, she had attached a few of these amazing old ads. So this is what I found at the bottom of the email, these Lost Friends ads. And what these were letters to the editor written in the late 1800s and the years after the Civil War by formerly enslaved families hoping to find news of the loved ones they had been separated from during slavery, sometimes decades and decades ago. And as I read these ads, I realized that what Diane had said in her letter to me was true. She said, every one of these ads is a story. And as I read these ads and then went to the database and just fell down the well of reading ad after ad after ad, I realized every one of these ads was the story of a family. And it was also a hope of finding and reconnecting with family, because what happened with these ads is they went out in this newspaper called the Southwestern Christian Advocate, and that traveled to thousands of subscribers, hundreds of post offices, hundreds of churches where it was read from the pulpits. And the hope was that somebody encountering those ads or hearing those ads would have news of these people and write back to the person who had placed the ads to help reconnect these families. So it was this early day ingenious social media network, basically. And so I was quickly fascinated with the ads. I began going often and reading them. Diane would keep sending me ads as she was entering them. A couple months later, she sent me an ad written by a woman named Caroline Flowers. And Caroline's story as a little girl was that her entire family was stolen from the plantation by a nephew of the plantation owner. And as he fled with them, he separated and sold them in places along the way. So Caroline's story became the inspiration for the Book of Lost Friends and the stories of Hanny in 1875, a girl just coming of age and discovering that perhaps through the Lost Friends ads, she might find the family she's given up hope of ever finding again. And Benny, a teacher in 1987, who rediscovers Hanny's story and hopes to use it to inspire her students in a very underserved school. And it became a story of hope. It became a story of what these people went through. Readers often ask me about the research. Where did I get the research? I like to go back. I don't spend a lot of time in history books. I tend to go back to primary sources. I want to hear the voices of lived experience who were there when these events happened. I want to hear how they spoke, the things they talked about. So I spent hundreds of hours in the WPA slave narratives. I spent a lot of time reading narratives that were written in the time period sponsored by abolitionists and other people, trying to get the stories out there of people who had been enslaved and their experiences. I spent a lot of time squinting over old travel maps to figure out the route that Hanny would have traveled and how she would have gotten from place to place on this sort of odyssey journey from South Louisiana to Texas. The stories were fascinating. They reminded me that history has so much to teach us, and not just the lessons of history, but also the lessons that when we're going through a tough time, history can be inspiring because it reminds us that people before us went through very tenuous, tough times as well. And they came through it and they went on and they built lives. So I hope the Book of Lost Friends will inspire you. I hope it will take you away from your own life for a little while. I hope it will introduce you, if you didn't know about it, to this piece of history. I hope it will bring you joy. I hope that we get to meet sometime in the future And in the meantime, happy reading.
We hope you enjoyed this virtual presentation as much as we did. Christamore House Guild would like to thank you for your continued support of Christamore House, our scholarship programs, and our educational programs.
And we look forward to seeing you for our 41st annual Book and Author Benefit next April 16th. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you.